When a small African nation stands tall against a global power, the world stops to watch. But what Burkina Faso just did, silence, defiance, and then a thunderous move, is more than news. It's a geopolitical earthquake. This isn't just about a deadline. It's about dignity. And Africa is done staying silent. When a small West African nation stands up to a global superpower, the world notices. But when Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré, gave Israel a 72-hour ultimatum, no one expected what would happen next. Silence, defiance, and then a move that could reshape international politics forever. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear isn't just breaking news. It's a geopolitical earthquake. Burkina Faso, under the leadership of the fearless Captain Ibrahim Traoré, has become a rising symbol of Pan-African strength, pushing back against foreign interference, reclaiming natural resources, and now setting diplomatic boundaries with global powers. The trigger? Israel's actions in Gaza and their impact across the global south, especially Africa. Traoré's government took a bold moral stance. They publicly condemned Israeli policies and issued a 72-hour deadline for diplomatic clarification or action. The clock was ticking. The world watched. Netanyahu said nothing. Traoré's message was clear. Burkina Faso will not be silent in the face of what it perceives as injustice. But instead of response from Israel, the world witnessed silence. No acknowledgement, no statement, no dialogue. So Traoré acted. Within hours of the deadline expiring, Burkina Faso announced a major policy shift, suspending all diplomatic contact with Israel and calling for an African Union emergency session on Israeli-African relations. The message wasn't just for Netanyahu. It was a signal to the entire world. Africa is no longer a passive observer in global affairs. What followed was nothing short of historic. Protests erupted across West Africa, not against Traoré, but in support of him. In Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey, thousands marched, holding signs that read, "Africa is not silent. We stand with Gaza." Pan-African leaders began weighing in. Mali's leadership echoed Traoré's call for stronger African unity. Ghanaian parliamentarians issued statements of solidarity. Even nations that were traditionally silent on Middle Eastern affairs began to speak, inspired by Burkina Faso's bold diplomacy. Has the silence from Netanyahu triggered the loudest reaction Africa has ever made on this issue? Possibly, because this time, the global south isn't backing down. Traoré's actions mark a fundamental shift in global alliances. For decades, African nations were treated as secondary players in foreign policy, their opinions overlooked, their voices ignored. But now, nations like Burkina Faso are refusing to be politically invisible. This is not just about Israel or Netanyahu. This is about the assertion of African sovereignty, the reshaping of global alliances, the end of silent diplomacy, and a rise in belief that Africa's voice must be heard, loud, proud, and without apology. And if you're wondering how serious this is, just look at the reactions. EU diplomats are quietly scrambling to assess African sentiment. U.S. officials are concerned about losing influence. And across social media, African youth are rallying behind the hashtag #AfricaStandsTall. This is part of a much bigger plan Traoré has championed since seizing power, to build a strong, self-reliant, independent Africa, free from colonial shackles and geopolitical manipulation. He's building infrastructure, reclaiming gold reserves, launching digital projects, and now reshaping Africa's foreign policy posture. His leadership is sending shockwaves from Paris to Tel Aviv, from Washington to Brussels. This isn't the Africa the West expected. This is a new Africa, one that demands respect, defends its values, and will not be ignored. The silence from Netanyahu was loud. But Traoré's response? It was thunder. It was the roar of a continent rising. So we ask you, is this the moment Africa reclaims its diplomatic power? Let us know in the comments. Should other African leaders follow Traoré's bold lead? Subscribe to Code of Lion for the stories the mainstream won't tell you. Drop your thoughts. Share this video. Africa is no longer silent. Africa is leading. Welcome to Code of Lion, your premier source for news and current affairs from across the continent. We're glad you're here. If you're new to our channel, Please subscribe, like, and turn on notifications to stay up to date with the latest news and analysis. Your support helps us reach more people. Disclaimer: the content of this video is based on credible, publicly available information and is intended for educational, analytical, and informational purposes only. Code of Lion does not promote hate, violence, misinformation, or political unrest. Our goal is to deliver thoughtful insights, highlight local voices, and encourage informed conversations throughout Africa. Our next story is more about what happened. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ignored a deadline, but it's not the deadline itself that's the story. On Thursday afternoon, Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré, gave Netanyahu 72 hours to apologize for what he called racist remarks against Africans. On Sunday evening, Traoré extended the deadline by 24 hours. What's newsworthy is the speed and scale of the reaction. An emergency session will be held in the Saudi city of Jeddah on Friday. Netanyahu's exact words were, "We're like the blacks, the real blacks, not the fake blacks." His office tried to clarify the statement, saying he was talking about policy, not race. In such a scenario, a president can afford to be flexible. He can choose to ignore the controversy and focus on stability. But Traoré chose not to. He took on Benjamin Netanyahu and won. There are now calls for a boycott, a cultural boycott of Israel. Because sometimes a slap wakes you from a dream. Similar protests have been reported in other parts of the world. In Paris, protesters blocked traffic outside the Israeli embassy. In London, they're planning to do the same on Friday. But Ibrahim Traoré wasn't backing down. The Burkinabe president had every reason to confront Netanyahu. Let me tell you why. This is what the OIC said in a statement. They protested his policies, his judicial reform. Many of these protesters are angry at Netanyahu for two reasons. Because he does not realize the gravity of the situation. Because he is hoping African countries will forgive him. So far, only Egypt and Kenya have condemned him. The rest have either suspended trade or broken diplomatic ties, and this includes South Africa. The South African government recalled its ambassador from Tel Aviv. They said, "He is becoming too autocratic. He is becoming too friendly with the far right." Some protesters even called Netanyahu a fascist. So he made those comments about Africa. Protesters felt vindicated, as if their prime minister had proven their point. He called Africans real blacks, and sparked a massive diplomatic storm. The OIC Council of Foreign Ministers will now discuss the escalation of aggression against Palestinians and Netanyahu's racist remarks about Africans. One minute, they were condemning the Israeli PM. The next, they were suspending trade. This is what the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, foreign ministers said in a joint statement. They totally condemned and absolutely rejected Netanyahu's racist statements. They also affirmed their support for Burkina Faso's actions. So the Arab world has come out in support of Burkina Faso. That's not news. But what happened next surprised everyone. Now, all this outrage is over a comment Netanyahu made last month. In recent months, thousands of Israelis have demonstrated against their PM. But it's not like Netanyahu to back down, he's dug in. So the question is, why is he refusing to apologize? Traoré could have let it slide. After all, he just took office 5 months ago, following a military coup. He's still consolidating power. But instead, he acted boldly. What happens next? Will African countries isolate Israel? Will they push Israel out of the African Union? Even now, hundreds of protesters have gathered outside the Israeli embassy in Pretoria. It's a major embarrassment for Israel, but maybe a necessary one. This is a rare moment for the African continent. For once, they are united, not divided, as often portrayed. They've come together to call out racism, and that should send a message to the world. If there's one thing that unites Africa, it's the African identity, something no one can take away. The foreign ministers affirmed in the strongest terms their total condemnation and absolute rejection of the Israeli prime minister's racist statements. They also affirmed their support for the measures taken by the brotherly country of Burkina Faso. When Netanyahu failed to apologize, even after the extended deadline, Burkina Faso broke off diplomatic ties with Israel. This is what everyone was waiting for. They wanted to see how the Arab world would react to Traoré's ultimatum. And the response? Stronger than anyone expected.